This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so welcome everybody to our Lunch and Learn. And as we sit in our beautiful sukkah, and our Lunch and Learn today is about Simchat Torah coming up, Shmini Atzeret, Simchat Torah, the last 2 days of the Sukkot holiday, which actually are not part of Sukkot, as we'll soon see, but a separate entity, and its Messianic connections. And let's also give thanks to David and Rebecca Room, who sponsored Lunch and Learn today in honor of Ray Glasser and all that he does for our shul. Okay, so let's begin. Everybody has their source sheets, and we have it over here for you also, Cheryl. I'll move it along. Okay, so we find in the Psukim, as we'll see, in the Medrash and in the Kabbalistic sources, that Sukkot is closely connected to the Zman Mashiach, to the time of the Messiah, the Mashiach, and to the nations of the world. Okay, so Sukkot is the spiritual climax of the year, right? This is the Jewish year started with the month of Nisan, and that's when our holidays began. And we had Pesach, and we had Shavuot, we had Tisha B'av, which will become a holiday, and then we had Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret, Simchat Torah. This is reaching the crescendo. So let's hear how the Vilna Gaon understands this and brings us all together in source number one. We'll go straight to the English. All the concepts of the month of Tishrei are hints to the future. Judgment on Rosh Hashanah, forgiveness afterwards on Yom Kippur, followed by Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret, and its inherent joy. So too in the future, the great day of judgment will occur, followed by that which has been said, I will sprinkle upon you pure waters and purify you. That is Yecheskel. And I will forgive whatever is left. That's Yirmiyahu. That's Yom Kippur. Afterwards, on Sukkot, will be the 7 canopies, as is known as the verse says in Isaiah, Yeshayahu, and a sukkah will be for shade from the day. Litzel Yomam, and Zman Simchatenu, strangers will stand and shepherd your sheep. Afterwards comes Shmini Atzeret, when those who deny the true God will be destroyed, and the people of Israel and those who join on will rejoice. It will be a day of completion, Atzeret, for you. So the same way that the world will go through these different stages, we have like a microcosm of these changes that we go through every year on our holiday cycle. And the ceremonies are all pointing towards this idea of redemption. Pesach was when we were created as a nation. That was the rebirth. That was the spring. Shavuot is the revelation on Mount Sinai. And we stay all night accepting that Torah. Sukkot looks forward towards the final redemption. Part of the tefillot that we have is the Hoshanot, and there it's always Hoshia na Hashem, save us, redeem us, bring that redemption. And we'll soon see how the Sukkah is meant to be a miniature model of Gan Eden, of the Garden of Eden, and the guests come, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. These are the guests that come to us, the Ushpizin as we call them, and we wave the 4 species together, which is a symbol of everyone, all the nation, having this unity and having this togetherness. That is the cycles that we go through and the microcosm cycle that we have at this point. The Haftorah that we read on Sukkot was from source number 2, Zechariah, which speaks about Gog Umagog, which we'll discuss. Gog Umagog is translated into English as Armageddon. Not sure where the R came from, but it's the Armageddon, right? It's Gog Umagog, and we will see just how much meaning is contained in those words, Gog Umagog. Zechariah, we have these psukim that we read. Hine Yom Ba'Hashem. Behold, God's awaited day is coming. Your spoils will be divided in your presence. I shall gather all the nations to Jerusalem to wage war. The city will be conquered. Then God will go out and wage war with those nations, as on the day he waged war, the day of battle. Vayah Hashem, the way we conclude every prayer that we say, every davening, whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening, we end off with Aleinu in this last verse. Vayah Hashem lemelech al kol haaretz. V'yomahu yeh Hashem echad ushmo echad. Hashem will be the melech, the king, over all the land. On that day, Hashem will be one. His name will be one. The names represent that we have different names that we attribute to God, referring to different ways that he deals with us. Sometimes we refer to it as compassion. Sometimes we refer to it as din, as judgment. At that point, we'll recognize that it's all compassion. His name will be one. Verse 11, V'yashvuva v'chem lo ye'od v'yashva yishlam v'vetach. Jerusalem will dwell securely. Verse 16, and it will happen that all who will be left from among all the nations that came upon Jerusalem, they will ascend every year to bow themselves before the King God, Master of Legions, Elokei Tzvakos, ulachog et chag ha-Sukkot. And they will celebrate the holiday of Sukkot. So all of a sudden, we see that there is a connection between Sukkot and Gog Umagog, between Sukkot and Armageddon. What is that understanding? And Cheryl, out there, I can't see you. I just moving the page so that it goes along. So if you want to say anything, don't raise your hand. You have to speak up. Otherwise, I won't know. So source number 3 is it's actually found in the Stone Chumash, but it's from Rav Hirsch. Rav Shimshon Rav Hirsch discusses the interconnection between the war of Gog and Magog. We'll need to understand again the words Gog, the meaning of Gog and Magog, and Sukkot. In the name Gog, one recognizes the word Gog. Gog means roof. And therefore, at once, one sees the contrast to Sukkah, right? There's a roof, and then there's what we have overhead over here, which is hardly a roof, an unstable covering of foliage. Actually, the whole history of mankind consists of this contrast. Just as people have the power to make themselves safe and secure against their earthly contemporaries by sturdy walls, so they delude themselves into thinking they can make themselves safe and secure against that which comes from above, right? Secure against God, secure against his power to direct matters. We can control things. They think they can find security in the protection of their own might, take their fate in their own hands, crown the building of human greatness with gabled roofs, rendering them independent of God. That is the philosophy of Gog, as opposed to our Sukkah philosophy. The war of Gog and Magog is the battle of Gog, roof, against Sukkah. The fight of the roof illusion of human greatness, which never allows rest, against the Sukkah truth of cheerful confidence and serenity, which comes of placing one's trust in God's protection. So it's a battle of the roof I can protect myself. I don't need God. I am safe. I will make my own fortress and I'm good. God, thanks but no thanks. Or the Sukkah, where we recognize that we are in God's hands. Rav Hirsch's explanation of the Gog-Magog relationship based itself on the Hebrew grammatical rule that the prefix mem, Gog umagog, the prefix mem expresses the idea of projecting something. Or is light, ma'or projects that light. Those are the luminaries of the heavenly bodies. So or is light, ma'or projects light. Gog is roof, Gog umagog is Gog umagog is the attempt to project this philosophy of sequestering ourselves away from God, having this buffer between us and God and being independent of God. Gog umagog, they try to project this view onto the world. And Gog and Magog is the battle against that view. And it is our sukkah that is the antithesis, the antidote to that view of the Gog and Magog. Now, Sukkah, Sukkah, as in Messianic times, it's about all the world recognizing God, everyone coming together. So Sukkah also has this idea, and this manifests itself in the sacrifices that are brought on Sukkot. There are 70 sacrifices, 70 bull parim sacrifices representing the 70 nations of the world, and these are brought on their behalf. This, of course, is a line that in the days to come, the nations will bring offerings to Jerusalem when on Sukkot, right? Recognizing that all of their blessings and all of their well-being came about as a result of the offerings that were brought in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple in Yerushalayim. And that's source number 4 from the Netziv. The bulls offered on Sukkot were for the sake of the nations of the world. And that is why Zechariah wrote that in the future they too will come during the festival to stand by their offerings. That is, they too will recognize God as king. They'll understand that their livelihood depends upon the additional offerings of Sukkot that the Jewish people bring on their behalf, that they were not offered, that were they not offered, then they would not have received their rainfall. This was the practice in the days of Shlomo Melech, King Solomon. This is during, of course, the time that the temple stood. And that is why we recite Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, that Megillah, before the wise men of the world. They would all gather, and we would share with them the wisdom of Shlomo about the temporary nature of this world, that it's not Gog, Umagog, but rather it is a world of a sukkah. This also is an aspect, this idea of recognizing how the materialism of this world is so fragile and temporary and fleeting. That is part of what we do on 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 Sukkot with the Hoshanot. That's the beating of the willows. And once again, we have from we have on this concept. One second. Did I skip something for you guys? Oh, there we go. This is our good. Hoshana Rabbah is the last day of Chol HaMoed Sukkot, and that is this Sunday. And that is considered to be the final stage of the judgment of Rosh Hashanah on Yom Kippur. The Zohar writes on the 7th day of Sukkot, Husiyuma Didina da Alma. That is the conclusion, the completion of the judgment of the world. Upitkin nafkin mibei malka. The edicts, the rulings are dispatched, so to speak, from the king's palace. Ugvuran mit ari umistaime bahayoma va'arve nachal tluyin talyan behu. The judgments are concluded. The brook willows, symbolizing rainfall for the coming year, depend on this day. And that is why we have the whole service of the Aravos. As Rav Hirsch explains, source number 6, the beating of the willow branches, we knock it up, we bang it onto the ground, symbolizes our rejection of a completely materialistic lifestyle and self-seeking pride. He writes very beautifully as follows in source number 6. The 4 species represent different things found in nature to be used for mankind's benefit. One category, things in nature that do not require any finishing touches by man. Sunlight, air, that is all supplied without our having to do anything. These are represented by the myrtle. That's the hadassim, the myrtle, since the sense of smell is the most prominent characteristic. That's part of the world that is just gifted to us. We don't need to do for that. 2, things in nature of inherent benefit to man, but mankind must extract benefit from them. And that is sustenance, food, represented by the date, the palm branch, which comes from the date tree. Etrog is both categories 1 and 2. And 3, things in nature which depend entirely on man for their perfection, upon which man exercises his power as their master, which he extracts all the usefulness that is in them by his skill. Nature supplies raw materials, mankind refines them for use. Dwelling, clothing, utensil. This is represented by wood, the arava, which has no scent and no taste or sustenance, something that is basically just wood. Thus, the arava symbolizes mankind using our own powers and skills. It represents humankind's conquest of the material world. The Jewish people's ideals can be compromised by overemphasizing their material wealth and relying on their efforts alone. Therefore, the prophets instituted the beating of the Aravot on Hoshana Rabbah, following 7 circuits around the altar, and nowadays 7 circuits around the Torah being held by the bima there. This symbolizes the rejection of self-seeking pride and the glorification of man's strength. The willow reminds us of those realms in which mastery of man's spirit over things material manifests themselves most, those things which nourish pride. So we need to recognize our place. Again, not the Gog Umagog, but the Sukkah stance that we need to take. Sukkot then ends, and we usher in a new holiday called Shmini Atzeret. Right? Often mistakenly referred to as the last days of Sukkot, but Sukkot has ended. It's a special new holiday, as the Psukim say, the Chamisha Asar, on the 15th day, the 7th month, is Chag Sukkot, the holiday of Sukkot for 7 days. And then the 8th day is a sacred holiday for you, not Sukkot. Atzeret he, a time of assembly. Once again, it is a Yom Tov. We don't do any malacha, any work besides the cooking related, but it's no longer Sukkot. Now, we still will sit in the sukkah on Monday of next week, Shmini Atzeret, without making the blessing of sitting in the sukkah, because we have what's called the Safek Yoma, the unsure day, So we treat it as it might be the 7th, it might be the 8th. Amar Belazar, source number 8. What is this idea of this atzeret, this gathering in? Belazar said, to what did those 70 bulls offered during the 7 days correspond? To the 70 nations of the world. To what does the single bull of the 8th day Shmini Atzeret correspond? To the unique nation, that singular nation, the Jewish people. This may be compared to a king who said to his servants, the citizens of the country, prepare for me a great feast. On the last day of feasting, he said to his beloved friend, prepare a simple, more intimate meal for me and you, that I may enjoy being with you. And that is that close intimacy that we share with Hashem on that last day, Shemini Atzeret, that's next week, Monday. And the Sfat Emes explains, like that Shemini Atzeret, there's no sukkah, there's no lulav, there's no etrog, there's none of that. What is the idea? Life in this world is outwardly focused, and therefore we need protection and a sukkah, which is God's testimony about us that the main focus in our lives is Torah and life in the next world. But Shmini Atzeret, which represents the life in the world to come, does not require the protection and shelter of the sukkah. It is itself a sukkah. So we leave the temporary protection this world offers, and we make our way into the world to come, so to speak, when we come to Shmini, when we come to Shmini Atzeret, and what was established to go along with that is Simchat Torah. We conclude the entire Torah every year. That's one of the customs. In the time of the Talmud, there was another custom that some would do over the course of 3 years. But we conclude it over the course of the year. And it was established that that completion should be done on Shmini Atzeret. Meaning, in Israel, it's just one day, and Shmini Atzeret is when they complete the Torah. Here, where we have the second day of Yom Tov, so we call the second day, the 8th day, or actually the 9th day, we call that Simchat Torah. The last day is referred to source number 10 as Simchat Torah because we rejoice and make a celebratory feast on that day to celebrate the completion of the Torah. We also have the custom in these lands to remove all the Torah scrolls in the ark and recite songs and praises. We also have the custom to encircle the bima with the scrolls. All of these customs are demonstrations of joy. We also have the custom to call up many people to the Torah. We also call up the children, that everyone should have a chance to participate. The Mishnah Brura, which is the writings of the Chavetz Chaim on the Code of Jewish Law, on the Shulchan Aruch, says one should exert oneself to dance and sing for the glory of the Torah. As is written concerning King David, he would leap and dance with all his strength before God. This is also stated in the name of the Arizal, the great Kabbalist. Furthermore, the Arizal is said to have achieved his highest spiritual levels at the time that he exerted himself with all his might for the joy of a mitzvah. Even concerning the Vilna Gaon, it has been written that he would dance before the Torah scrolls with all of his strength. As source number 12, the Siftei Chaim says, Shmini Atzeret is the natural choice as the day to celebrate the Torah, because our yearly cycle could have begun and ended at any point in the year. Why specifically on Shmini Atzeret? The connection between Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah is clear. There is no greater expression of the essence of Shmini Atzeret, a day totally devoted to cleaving to God. There's no props, there's no shofar, there's no lulav, there's no etrog, there's no matzah, there's no sukkah. The usual props, the usual accoutrements, the usual items that we have, Simchat Torah, it has none of those. All we've got is HaTorah Hazot, other than rejoicing with the Torah that God gave to his people, by virtue of which we cleave to God's blessed being. Through the Torah, that is how we connect to God. And lastly, from the Sefer HaToda'ah, Rabbi Eliel Kitov writes, as the sages have stated, from the day that the temple was destroyed, God has no presence in his world other than the 4 cubits of halacha. Meaning, when there is no temple, where halacha is, where Jewish law is being studied, is being observed, that creates that sanctuary here on earth for God's presence. How could this be? For who took away God's world from him? Rather, the correct understanding of this statement is that the divine presence only rests in a place where there is joy and no sadness. After the destruction, the entire world was sunk into desolation and diminution. Everything was affected, even the mitzvot. The Torah and the 4 cubits of halacha remained untouched, and the joy of the Torah remains as complete as it was before the destruction. You know, it's interesting. There, I think the Chavetz Chaim writes, everything that we have created by God, we've got the great grandchildren. You know, the first animals, the first people, the first plants, the first fruits. Now we've got seeds going so many generations after. That's what we say, Zot, right? Baruch Shenatan Torah Lama Yisroel B'Kedushato. Blessed is God who gave the Torah to his nation Israel in all of its kedusha, in all of its holiness. It has not been a generation after generation. It is that Torah itself. That remains as it was, complete, as it was before the destruction of the temple. Therefore, the divine presence continues to dwell there and rejoices with Israel on the day of Simchat Torah. So the holiday cycle that we go through, like we said, is a microcosm of the stages of the world. Sukkot, Simchat Torah, Shmini Atzeret is Sukkot is Gog Magog, and Simchat Torah is, and Shmini Atzeret is the time, the world to come. No physicality, no physical mitzvot, just a connection of us and Hashem, us and God. And that is the refrain that we say throughout the davening, the prayers on Shmini Atzeret, is the idea, Ein Od Milvado. There is nothing, there is absolutely nothing milvado besides God. Okay, my friends, we will call it over here. Once again, I thank you to David Room for sponsoring. And there you are, Cheryl. Good. So in case you did want to speak, I couldn't see you, but good. Okay, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and a Moadin L'Simcha to everybody. And we're not going to have lunch and learn for the next few weeks. I'm planning, please God, I'll be going to Israel right after Simchat Torah, and I'll be there for about 10 days. I will cover 2 Thursdays. So we will resume in November, Be'ezrat Hashem. I will send your best regards. Absolutely. I will send you.